All right, well, I think we're going to hear another somewhat technical talk about the Open TrueCrypt, or the Open Crypto Audit project. I think you guys probably have seen, if you guys use TrueCrypt at all, that there's been a little bit of a change with that project, and now it's something I think we're all interested in, whether you're using it to do kind of whole disk encryption and protect your own data, or if you do things like me and do forensics and need to transfer data and need a secure and trusted way and an easy way to get muggles to understand how to use crypto, TrueCrypt usually serve that purpose for me. So this is a pretty important project, and while we only have half of the original slated speaking team, I think Mr. White's going to do a great job for us. So let's give him a big party track welcome.
Hello, DEF CON. Well, first I want to send regrets from Matt. We thought up until a week and a half ago he was going to be able to come. So unfortunately he wasn't, so it's me. Hopefully we'll have a good lively discussion. I've got quite a bit of material and also some really great swag for questions at the end. So here we go. So this, the idea is that I want to tell a little bit about the history of what we've done, how we got here, and kind of the community aspect. There is a technical element here. I'm a security engineer, I'm not a cryptographer, so I think we'll do a reasonably deep dive in some of the technical material, but I'll be the first to raise my hand if I'm punching above my weight class here. So here's what I'd like to do, just sort of go over some basics on first principles for security engineering. Some of this may be old hat for a lot of people in the room, but I think sometimes people go through this cycle in their career where their sort of foundation core ideas and sort of guiding ways to think about things that are kind of memorized, but they're not really applied. And then sometimes it takes a while before you sort of see the elegance in I guess simple ideas. I want to talk a little bit about some of the revelations post-Snowden, specifically around crypto and how that impacts. Then obviously I think what a lot of people are here for is the TrueCrypt story, because you can't make this stuff up. And then a little bit about our project and the people that are behind that, and then as we go. So just a couple things about me and Matt. I've been around the scene for a while, but I haven't done tons of presenting. My first DEF CON was about 10 years ago. I've got a weird background. I just confuse recruiters and HR departments and stuff. So a lot of training in signal analysis, a lot of work in brain and biomedical imaging, and then sort of distributed systems. I spent a fair amount of time working on cardiac safety, so ECG analysis. And in that world, people think a lot about secure systems, right? I mean, when you're evaluating medications to see if there's, tiny microvolt differences in heart wave rhythms, the kind of principles that one applies to software and for assurance, it's sort of in a different class. So I have done a fair amount of information assurance. More recently, I've been working on public cloud security, so a lot of public-facing systems for Amazon and Google Compute. And then most recently, with the OCAP project, the Open Crypto Audit project, we're working with the Linux Foundation Core Infrastructure Initiative. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then on the private side, I've got some disclosures in terms of NGOs, so Doctors Without Borders, the World Health Organization, a couple other familiar orgs I'm doing some work with. So I like to work on strange signal problems like ECG and drug safety. A little bit about Matt. I think most people here probably know him by reputation, but for the record, this is his background at Hopkins and his particular research interests. These are not his dachshunds, but he has 2 dachshunds, and his blog talks about, he has pictures of his dachshunds. He does not have pictures of his dachshunds on his website. These are my 2 hounds. I was telling Jack Daniel a few days ago that I think I was channeling him. Just to give you a little perspective on sort of getting here, I think, so Wednesday, drove cross country in the wagon with the 2 dogs, and landed, unpacked, kissed everybody goodbye, and hopped on a plane. So it's been a good journey. This is the spirit of kind of what how I want to sort of frame things. I think we have a lot to learn from lots of different levels of technical background, and in this quote from Jack I thought was really apropos. So if you've seen these, I think they're called 10 Rules of Security Engineering or something, Scott Kolb has this great quote. And I want to emphasize this a little bit too, because we can get so caught up, I think, sometimes in the particular mechanics of these projects that it's important to kind of keep these in perspective. So this is it's a great quote I like. I added a slightly minor addition to that, which is even with disk crypto, we've got to keep an eye out, a vigilant eye. These are some sort of classics. I think people generally know these, but for the people that may not be familiar with security engineering. This particular one is more, I guess, for an archaeological statement. I think there's probably no one in this room that's not aware of these, but if this deck turns up sometime in the future, people will have a little context of what we're doing. But crucially around the mass surveillance, in particular, what drew a lot of attention in the academic crypto world were the revelations around Bull Run, and were the revelations around intentionally subverting the processes and committees around our sort of critical security systems. And NEFF has a fantastic timeline that sort of goes through the entire spectrum. So besides the sort of sociological and political pieces, I think a lot of people kind of woke up when NIST came out and said, we're actually going to review our entire body of existing cryptographic work. This was late fall of last year. The President's Advisory Committee sort of implied that these were serious issues, and then eventually with the deterministic random bit generator, the random generator that's sort of one of the official standards for NIST, it was just pulled. So, which brings us to TrueCrypt. So, I think people generally know, but it's a piece of software for file volume and full disk or whole disk encryption. Oops, sorry. It's been downloaded about 30 million times. Been around for about 10 years. In the open world, it's literally listed in the Fedora and Debian license sort of archives as forbidden items. You have to kind of go out of your way to include it, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it's it's a really popular tool, and it's used by quite a lot of people, and not just human rights workers and activists and so on, but corporations too. This is a snapshot from this morning. So if you want to get bulk data in and out of Amazon Web Services, this is what they officially support. So this stuff it's out there. The problem, though, in sort of looking at trusted systems and the provenance and history of things, we realized sort of late last summer, maybe this wasn't news to some people, but for many it was, the TrueCrypt had never been audited. You see a lot of things in sort of tech press, like statements about this is FISMA compliant, or it's somebody adopted it for some PCI thing or whatever. But if you sort of cut through all that, it turns out that at least through last fall, there had never been a formal cryptanalysis on TrueCrypt. And so, people are relying on it in some cases, with dissidents and activists putting, there were huge stakes riding on this. So there were some issues around the different versions of whether you downloaded the binary or you try to compile it from source. There's volume header differences in the different platforms. It was originally, by the way, a Windows project, and was eventually ported to Mac and Linux. Bruce and colleagues a few years ago did a formal cryptanalysis on sort of the deniability volume aspect. So there's this idea that one can create a hidden volume, and then within that, or sort of adjacent to that, you can also have a volume that's sort of known, and so you give up your keys or your password, and the idea is that you can still have secure information and plausible deniability. That's not a great. The implementation was not that strong. Around the time when this kicked off, I think just a few weeks after the project began, Javier did an amazing job. And if you go through his blog to look at the process, there are in some cases 7- and 8-year-old RSA headers and fairly obscure dependencies that without which you cannot compile this code on Windows. And the last license review, sort of in 2008, the attorneys from Red Hat and Fedora and the open source group said the language in the license is so unconventional. We can't have any, we can't make any assurances about litigation, and just said it's not a free license. So there are some really, really strong sort of elements of this. This is from what's it called, the Sagitta Brutalis. So this is Jeremy and Per Thorsheim's company that does these monster cracking systems. This is 8 Radeon 290Xs. So the numbers on the right are hashes per second. So straight Unix DS crypt, 952 million per second. True crypt with this particular chain together, 17,000. So if the password's strong, at least by some cursory measures, that's pretty interesting. The contender is OS X, by the way, but that's, as I understand it, it's actually adjusted on a per machine basis or calibrated to your CPU. So it's, at least from people who've looked at this initially, there doesn't seem to be any sort of obvious bypasses in terms of just sort of raw brute force. So one of the other things that's kind of interesting about this is the development team. If you just go on Wikipedia, there's a ton of information out there, right? So what we know is some of the original developers were interviewed. These things are on multiple GitHub repositories. There are trademark filings in the UK, France, China, the Czech Republic, and in the US. It was set up as an entity about, I think, a year and a half, maybe a year after the project kicked off. There's a piece of software called Encryption for the Masses, and I think you could do a whole talk on that, but only to say that there was some controversy around how clean the code was in terms of license that was included, and there was very early on some sort of fairly serious threats of litigation from against the TrueCrypt developers. I think that in combination with what was very common at the time, which was these shareware and download sites, would sort of highlight that this is TrueCrypt or whatever the package was, and then maybe there's adware bundled or other things that were bundled. And so in a way, it was almost like there was brand dilution. People weren't really clear where the official source of the code was. And to be fair, for the first year and a half, it had sort of a quirky source. This was created as a nonprofit organization, so therefore there are public IRS filings. There's the original announcements that are still archived. And this is the thing. A lot of this information is sort of hiding in plain sight, right? So some of the people who were literally on those first day or second day announcements on mailing lists when TrueCrypt was announced are still quite active on Usenet with the same email addresses. We did a little digging, and there are some published academic papers with colleagues of theirs, and there's actually acknowledgments in a few dissertations and theses that say, thank you so-and-so for working with me on this and on TrueCrypt. So the information's out there. But some things we're not, or at least I won't, I don't feel quite as comfortable sharing. And so why is that? Well, remember this, right? Everybody got a good laugh. And a few days later, the story sort of died down. The official mailing list or forum or whatever, not Dorian Nakamoto. And I think a lot of people sort of forget that. They're like, well, it was a weird story. It was misattributed, probably. I'm not sure it was the best journalism. But a lot of people forget this part. So, I mean, within hours of that story breaking, Dorian's house was kind of surrounded, and I think crucially this. He had some serious health problems as a result of this. He had some serious financial problems. I mean, his life was really turned upside down. So all that's just a way of saying there's a huge amount of information already out there. There are endless discussions and forums and things where, as I said, these public records can be obtained. I don't think it benefits anyone to try to do a doxing. And we can, I want to leave maybe the last 20 minutes or so open for questions, but we can talk more about that if you'd like. So back to the code. So this is, I think, attributed to Torvalds. Give enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Well, in the crypto world, one of the things I've really come to appreciate is it's a very, very small community. Security engineering is fairly small anyway, but cryptographic engineering and sort of pure math cryptography, very different beast. But cryptography engineering, protocol construction, that's a very, very special narrow area. And so it's not the case that with just lots of people looking, yeah, bugs will be found, but some of the subtle, sort of cipher chain and some of the implementations for random number generators, they're going to be missed. I mean, there's value in the open community. There's value in all of that, but it's not the same as having a really, really, highly skilled, highly trained crypto engineer. I love this picture. So this is from 1920. Sam Rashevsky. He beat 14 chess masters at the same time in simultaneous play. So I mean, the point of this is just that there are some skill sets which are just orders of magnitude different than others. So we talked and we said, this is an important piece of software. People seem to be using it. Many of the people in the project are using it. We really didn't know a thing about it, like, under the hood. So let's do it. So I registered the domain. This was a conversation on Twitter with Matt Green and I sort of announced it. Matt threw in some money, I did as well. We were contacted by a group called FunFill, which I didn't realize at the time, but I guess they were sort of just starting up. It was kind of a startup company. And then anyway, this went out. So Matt sort of noodles on it for a little while. Maybe a couple weeks goes by. He's like, we need to talk about this because I think there's something here. So we blogged about it. And then it hit the front page of Y Combinator. And then the internet showed up. Yeah. So we were assuming the conversations were going to be around the code and the analysis, but what I didn't fully appreciate and what I now understand is an enormous amount of work is the sort of the community piece of that. We advertised we sort of promoted the idea that here are basic goals. We'd like to do basic cryptanalysis. Some bug bounties would be a good idea. The dream would be if we could raise enough money to have, one of the few security engineering firms in the world who not only have the skills, but whose reputation is such that, the people that we trust are likely to say, yeah, this is credible. So there was no shortage of people wanting to help. There was no shortage of firms stepping up and saying, I've got some, free static analyzer or whatever, but there's a very small number of professional firms that do this sort of work. And then, we set up a thing on Indiegogo and said, well, I don't know, maybe we can offer people T-shirts if they give a certain level, or DVDs of sneakers and things. And wow. So yeah, in the first, you have to set an arbitrary number of days for a campaign, so we set it for 60. This is day one, in like the first 4 hours. Okay, I think there's we really struck a chord here. When we set up Bitcoin, you have to understand this was as a donation mechanism, this was the history through the year, right? And so, if that's coming up here, right? So this is this is April, and the project started around here. And, we can talk about the speculation and the market price of Bitcoin, but when people are sending literally $5 donations and $1 donations, and, really sweet elderly ladies from, Yorkshire are asking for an address to send a check because they're not really online, like, you take a serious, responsibility as sort of fiduciary. So in that context, we're taking Bitcoin, and this starts happening. Like, we're not like some investment house. So, people, there's, I don't know if it makes sense to hang on to this, because for all we knew, this was a monster crash about to happen. And, there were some monster crashes. But anyway, the point of all that is to say, we took it very seriously, that people entrusted us with, with their support. So anyway, now we're still in like a week into this, right? And eventually, within a few days, Ars Technica and The Economist and Nature pick up on this. And then one morning, there's like 30 grand in the PayPal account. Wow. What? How much? So yeah, I mean, we hadn't really thought this through. So at the point, we sort of put the brakes on and said, wait, this isn't just a couple $1,000s here and there for a bug bounty. This is fairly serious. So we created a nonprofit corporation, and one of the ideas was that it doesn't make sense to spend a significant chunk of money on taxes, because it's not what people had intended the funds to go for. We have a mission statement, we have a charter and bylaws and so forth, and all the standard things that you'd have. This is all on our website as well. We have a nice logo. And one of the most important things we did was Matt and I said, we have some interest or expertise in area X, but Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, we're out of our element. Oh, yes.
What?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Very good with it.
I guess we have a pause. All right. First time speaker at DEF CON. Love?
Oh, yeah. I like it.
Congratulations. Good luck with getting back to your talk.
Where were we? Thank you, sir. I don't want to give short shrift to the incredible people that stepped up and offered to help in ways small and large. I really want people to go to the OpenCryptoAudit.org website, the people page. This is an extraordinary group of people who stepped up and offered to be technical advisors. And part of what that means is we knew we'd be compiling a report. We knew we'd be dealing with a lot of different material, but we also knew that it would span basic cryptography, security engineering, protocol engineering, legal reviews. So I don't know if people know, but I mean, Jim Nero, for example, is one of the top sort of IP and sort of security-oriented attorneys, and he's also a CISSP and a practitioner, which is really amazing. Thomas Ptasek, I mean, if you don't know the Metasanil, I think that's how you pronounce it, challenges, definitely check that out. They just announced, I think a couple days ago at Black Hat, they're going through, I think, level 8. It's an incredible program. Runa, formerly with Tor, Nate, I mean, it's an incredible lineup. Moxie even said, I'll take a look and see what you got, and give some thoughts and ideas when we get further along. Joe's here from his group. I mean, anyway, it's an extraordinary group. And also, if you don't know Trevor Perrin, he's he's one of the brightest in the world in cryptographic engineering and crypto protocols. So anyway, just incredibly honored to be working with people of this caliber. And so, because we have a nonprofit, so we need officers, and Matt and I stepped up, and then we approached Marcia Hoffman, formerly with the EFF, although actually I think she's still special counsel for EFF. And Marcia's been extraordinary. And then we had our first board meeting, because this is how we roll. Yeah. Take that, man. So, lots of connections. So there's sort of the provenance and the history of the project and trying to make sense of things, and obviously lots and lots of questions began. So we did, as I said, we reached out to a small number, it's a handful of organizations that can do this. We had a tremendous response from ISEC Labs. If you don't know ISEC, find find someone who you really, really, really respect in the crypto world and ask them about ISEC. They've been extraordinary partners. The Open Technology Fund stepped up and said, we have an arrangement with ISEC. We've done some funding. We have an existing contract mechanism. We're actually willing to kick in sort of a matching grant. So, you can double the amount of engineering hours on this. And, that'll be our contribution. I don't know if I actually put this in, but we also, sort of fairly into the audit, we got a $10,000 donation from CERT Austria, and then some other larger donations. We'll talk about that in a second. So fast forward, I don't know if people have seen this, but so it's online. So we spent many, many weeks working with ISEC on, stand-ups, going through each of the different sort of pieces of their part of the project. It's important to say too that what we talked with ISEC about, and I think there was pretty broad consensus among the group, was there's a long history of security failures that have nothing to do with crypto, but they're in crypto products. So this was all sort of post Heartbleed and around this time too, pre Heartbleed, but that tradition is very well known. And so while crypto's hard, all the other things on sort of the foundation of the stack are also very hard and also easy to get wrong. So this is what we wanted them to focus on. So memory management, constructions of the different classes, data structures. These, not random number generators, not multiple cipher blockchains, different cipher suites, but more in sort of the foundation elements. And so a couple of their engineers, augmented by peer review of some of their senior principals, looked at this, and basically what they came up with is they said, well, the way that the volume header is derived is maybe not so strong. But again, remember the slide I showed a little while earlier with the number of hashes per second on sort of a brute force. These things are all relative, right? And so there was some discussion about sensitive information being paged out from the kernel stacks. So the idea is that if, let's say you've got TrueCrypt running and you've got a volume open, and keys in memory or passwords in memory, let's say you hit a malicious, website that's doing, like an XML entity explosion, like I think we saw a couple days ago this quadratic header where you declare a single entity in an XML block, and then the way that's invoked, you can basically exhaust memory. You can max out CPU. The idea was that, particularly on a Windows system, it's fairly easy to contrive very, very simple proofs of concept where memory is just getting paged like mad. And so when that's happening, you could get raw key material being saved to disk, to non-encrypted disk. The decompression system, not unlike liblz, which is very prominent in the Linux world, and we have systems all over that depend on that. The particular one used was sort of deprecated. But again, this project's been around for 10 years. I mean, some of the core elements were built 6 or 7 years ago. And there were several places where they're using memset to clear sensitive data. And so the idea is that, I've got a password or a key, I do some manipulation on it, and I say memset, basically wipe that out. And I'll show you in a minute why that's a problem. But the thing is, none of those actually address the TrueCrypt security model, right? Because one of the reasons I spent some time on the sort of fundamentals earlier is, let's say that scenario plays out. You've got TrueCrypt on, you've got a volume open, you've got key material in memory, you hit a malicious website. Well, the fact that the vector is, very specialized in paging memory to somehow, to get those keys to disk, which can be in a Hibernate file or something later, let's take a step back. You've hit a malicious site that's running an exploit on your machine. It's just not in the TrueCrypt model. It's not part of the security guarantees or security promise. So what does that mean? Well, in aggregate, none of those vulnerabilities discovered are, as I said, part of the security model. If you had physical access to the machine to a mounted volume, like a machine's in sleep mode, there's already today exploits for that. I mean, they're like $200. But that's not just TrueCrypt. That's BitLocker, that's FileVault, that's DMCrypt, that's the Lux family on Linux. All major full disk and whole disk encryption implementations have similar attack vectors. So if we're not really weak in the things that are actually in the security promises, and again, the key derivation, we could probably on the password derived key increase the iteration count. You already saw in the brute force, it's pretty decent. It can be improved, but there's no showstoppers. So this was around the time, we've sent the manuscript around for review. The team looked at it. ISEC had signed off for their peer review. And then, it's a great line by John Lennon, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. TrueCrypt.org goes dark. My Twitter just starts lighting up. Dude, what's wrong with the website? Did it get owned? Did you get it? Like, oh, are you kidding me? You don't know how much pain we went through because, you never know what people are going to, how they're going to spend time. So, I mean, we went through a fair amount of pain to, harden our site. I mean, it's basic like HTML. I mean, it's not like some ancient WordPress thing or something. And so I'm looking like, what are you talking about? Our site's fine. They're like, no, not your site. TrueCrypt.org. What? Yeah, so TrueCrypt.org does an immediate read. Actually, at first, it didn't even show this. The morning or the afternoon this happened, I don't have a screenshot of it. Basically, you had an error message from SourceForge saying this may be a malicious web page, and I guess they've got some like automatic intrusion software or something that says if your volume is normally like this, and then one day it shoots 2 orders of magnitude, and it's a header redirect that looks like it's a curl call or something, pop this message up. So anyway, eventually this was the message you see on SourceForge. So you go to TrueCrypt.org. You get redirected to SourceForge, which was where the project was originally launched. But years ago, it sort of was, not abandoned, but just sort of, there were basically directions on it that said that, TrueCrypt.org is the official website. But I mean, look at the language here. So, TrueCrypt's not secure, it may contain unfixed security issues. What? What are you talking about? And so, my phone and Matt's and the whole board's, everybody's getting pinged on this. Like, what's the deal? And the short answer is we don't know. We had an official line of communication, an official email contact, but the mail exchange went offline too. Well, if your official line of communication is silent, and you've got some people's personal email addresses, okay, we can try that too. So some other people were involved that just, when the story broke, were curious, and so they started contacting people. And there were some other sort of lines of communication, but it wasn't really clear because some of the conversations we had with people who are listed in the public record were like, well, the keys have been destroyed, our developer keys have been destroyed. We're not even sure if we still have access to the site anymore, meaning TrueCrypt.org. How do you not know if you have access to the site? What does that even mean? And so there's all this speculation. And so we sort of took a step back and we said, okay, whatever the sort of sociological equivalent of Occam's razor is, maybe it's a bunch of middle-aged guys that just said, I don't need it. I don't need the headache. I don't need the, you know. One of the messages was XP's been end-of-life, and that's what it was sort of built around. But there's so many strange inconsistencies on here. There's just so many question marks. But, you know, but the thing is, we have a project. We have, you know, we have stated goals. We've taken support from people around the world. And so we talked about it for a while. We said, you know, it doesn't matter. I don't care if someone flipped out. I don't care if someone rage quit. I don't care if an agency got to somebody. I don't, if it's an internal battle. I mean, there are all these things that were sort of, you know, speculated, and many of which might be possibilities. We said, look, we're in the middle of an audit, so we're going to continue on. We've got the findings from the ISEC team. We're going to start phase 2, which is the formal cryptanalysis. And so one of the other things that's a real drag about this is, you know, there were lots and lots of documentation and examples and sources and just materials on the website. All that got wiped. I mean, there are mirrors now that people have set up, but one of the first questions was, well, what the hell code do you use? Right? I mean, you can't use the stuff that's on SourceForge because it was labeled 7.2. That's read-only, and it literally has pop-ups in there. If you install 7.2 TrueCrypt on your system, it has pop-ups saying basically don't use this, or it's, you know, it may have issues. And they literally ripped out the write and the update code. Like, no, you know, whatever issues existed the day before, and whatever security guarantees could be made the day before the announcement, I don't, you know, they're still there from a pure software perspective. So we've had a couple delays, and I was hoping to give a little bit more update on the phase 2. But basically, Thomas and Nate are kind of mentoring or organizing phase 2. But that will be a formal cryptanalysis. That will be looking at, you know, the cipher chains at excuse me, at the random number generator constructions and the protocol constructions and so forth. We've talked about several post-audit scenarios. What we can't do is we can't support the development of a project now that's a moving target. The people who contributed the project said, we want a verdict on TrueCrypt 7.1. This is used by millions of people, so we're going to give you a verdict on TrueCrypt 7.1. We can't tell you it's absolutely secure, rock solid or not. What we can say is, we looked at these 10 things and we didn't find any issues. And as much of that as possible we can do. Obviously, lots of questions. We have had some conversations with I think they were originally calling themselves the Next Crypt organization in Europe, but they've sort of announced that they're holding off until we finish phase 2. You can't audit an ongoing live project, which is just, you know, ripping out core classes and things. So I want to spend just a minute or two on some secure coding pieces and explain, maybe elaborate a little bit more on the ISEC findings, and then, as I said, we can open it up for questions. This is a great quote. I think it's Maychek is the founder and CEO of Penboard. I'll let you read it, but there's no difference from the attacker's point of view between gross and tiny errors. Both of them are equally exploitable. In the real world, if you build a bookshelf, forgetting to tighten one of the screws all the way, it doesn't burn down your house. I love that. So one of the things that people talk to us a lot about is, well, there's all kinds of tools. There's tons of tools. There's static analyzers, dynamic analyzers, there's intelligent static analyzers. Yes, and some of those help. Some of those are crucially needed. The world is not for lack of auditing tools. I highly recommend people take a look at these examples, but prepare yourself before you do. I'll sort of go through this quickly. So this is a quote by the former director of NSA Information Assurance Directorate, where he basically says, yeah, source code is interesting and sometimes it's helpful, but computers don't work on source code. They work on, they work on machine code. So real quick, consider hypothetical. Memset, does that work or not? Well, it depends. It depends on your compiler, it depends on your flags, or your pragma, your optimizations. I'm going to show you several real quick. These are all from the Viva 64 group. So Visual Studio, I know people have to deal with Windows, but so here's from Windows. Example 1, memset, example 2 using the secure set. Memset just gets optimized out. So this is a simple example of a pop-up dialog box, but what if it were the earlier example? Password, key, memset clear, nah. This is where the function would have started. This is where the code returns. You didn't do anything with the memory that you set, so therefore we're not going to bother to do the inline compile and actually do anything with you. Secure zero memory does. This is not a slam on GCC, it's not a slam on Visual Studio, it's not a slam on any particular one. It's that these are complex tools and have lots of non-obvious side effects. And even if they've been around for say 4 or 5 years, your OS may not have anything close to a current version. And learning from other people. From the Tor project, I see 5 key files. It's a problem. NSS, that's a problem. Then you get fun stuff like this. Basically the issue there. All right. So just a couple thoughts on trust. This is true, and it's really depressing. This is it's not Unicode, I forget what it's called, but there's a coding standard. So this cert is accepted as legit from every major mobile system, every major desktop browser. You have any idea who that is? I don't. More on trust. So Linksys, Netgear, home router. See that? PCAP utility built in. It was diagnostic, but it randomly sends frames back to the mothership just for diagnostics. What? As recently as February, if you were running Red Hat, CentOS, Amazon Linux, Oracle Linux, you were actually running, with OpenSSL, you were actually running Hobble-OpenSSL because there are upstream requirements with the shipped blah, 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 because of export controls. Anyway, Heartbleed. So this is a perfect forward secrecy cipher, which was happy to give up the goods. So takeaways, again, most of the catastrophic failures were secure coding errors. They weren't crypto errors. We have a long tradition of that. Tools are important, but they're not enough. And subject matter expertise is crucial. Also, in terms of the unpaid volunteers volunteers are also crucial. They're not enough. What we really need, and what we've been working on, we're in talks with the Linux Foundation, the Core Infrastructure Initiative, as well as some other organizations on really developing a working model for public code review, because this is important stuff, and particularly in the crypto world, but security engineering broadly. Because even with a great chain, right, oh, just, so yeah, I've got a few extras. This is probably not your threat model. we could talk about that if you want. Go through real quick, sorry. All right, and then finishing up. So reports released. We're working on the reports in phase 2. So we can open up. 5 minutes? 5 minutes for questions. I have, for really good questions, I have original vintage movie posters of war games, of sneakers. I have sneakers DVDs, and I have t-shirts. So questions, please.
So you mentioned that there's, all these static analysis and dynamic analysis tools, and they're great, but they're not enough. And you also mentioned that a lot of the errors are not crypto errors, they're secure coding errors. Ignoring crypto errors for the moment, what do we need to bridge the gap between what tools can find now in just general coding, secure coding errors, to a point where your average coder, because there's a lot of people in the world who don't spend time learning how to code securely, what tools are we missing to make your average coder able to run a checker and have some reasonable assurance that they haven't made stupid errors?
Well, I think one of the most crucial things are projects, initiatives like the Metasna Crypto Challenge, Crypto Pals. I can't say enough about the service to the community that Thomas and the group is doing. We can talk more about it afterwards, but I think it's really, it's a training and a visibility thing and an awareness. And a lot of it is things that are not obvious. But I think there are some tools. I think awareness and training are crucial, but I also think we need to work on a better model in general, because I think our current model is just broken. When Cisco takes a week to literally just count that it had 60 plus devices post Heartbleed, just to enumerate how many of their systems were affected, and people were like, oh, there's this thing called libxml, libs, PNG, libz. I mean, yeah, we've got to be rethinking the whole way that we approach trusted systems.
Thanks.
Come on up.
What sort of steps have been taken to address either incoming legal or governmental requests that information not be disseminated to the public? Or what are your plans? Is there a fallback plan for when these challenges do occur?
You mean on the project itself in terms
Correct.
of what do they call obligations or national security letters? We've received no national security letters. This is already, it's online. We have signed statements from the ISEC team and from the people on this project. So we've not been, served or noticed by any government agency. And I suppose if we were, we have some of the best constitutional attorneys in the world working with us. I don't know that that's a great plan, but it's our plan. Come on up. Next.
Do you guys have any plans to, after this is all done, continue on with other open source projects and audit them? Because I think that's a problem. There's so many open source projects, and we all just go on faith that they're good.
No, right. I appreciate you saying that. Thanks. I didn't even mention, I'm sorry, we're auditing OpenSSL. Sorry, the Open Crypto Audit Project is auditing OpenSSL. It's one of the most ambitious security projects in history. We're doing it.
Great. Awesome.
And I think, by the way, there's probably 12 other like runners up that are really well positioned too. I think we'll do a couple more, and then I'll be out in the Chill Cafe, and we'll talk as long as you guys want. One more?
Just real quick, how do you get involved with this Open Crypto Audit project?
For phase 2, it's going to be a mix of sort of guided sort of exercises, but it's going to have much more of the community kind of full participation. We needed the sort of phase 1 to go as it did. The second one will not be near as much professional services, although it will have some of the top cryptographers in the world working and coordinating. But basically just reach out and contact us. And we've got, Matt and I are online on Twitter. We've got email addresses up at the opencryptoaudit.org, but we're happy to talk to people. Be patient. We get flooded sometimes with requests, so you won't hurt our feelings if you ping us again in a week or two and say, what can I do to help? Because this by no means is Matt and I. I mean, there are many, many people that made it possible that we've done so far. Last one?
First of all, just want to say thanks to you guys for doing this. And two quick questions. One, how can the community support you? And two, can you offer any comment on the possibility of TrueCrypt's support for GPT and UEFI?
I think that's maybe a Matt question on the last one. Do the first one again, I'm sorry?
How can the community support you guys while you work on it?
Get involved and stay aware of things like the Core Infrastructure Initiative. This is looking at every core element of the stack. I mean, from the most basic all the way up the stack. There's going to be some big announcements coming. We're being approached by some pretty sizable organizations, and we'll be needing help. But for phase 2, as I said, I mean, it's going to be a global bug hunt. And by the way, we still have like $30,000. So I mean, there are going to be some decent payouts over the next couple months. So ideally, we'd get more, but that's where we are so far. So I think we'll stop there. I'll take questions out, and then still got lots of swag. So thank you, everybody.